UN Hypocrisy in Gaza, Ethiopia, double standards on staff torture claims. The different responses to UN staff torture claims in Ethiopia and Gaza, mapping debt and crises, and why what happens in space matters to humanitarians. On the radar, Ethiopia, a 2-week ordeal involving torture of humanitarian staff. A 2-week ordeal involving torture. Ethiopian security forces allegedly detained and tortured humanitarian staff with little public pushback from the UN. That's one of many details found in an evaluation report published this month on the failed collective aid response in Tigray and northern Ethiopia. A scathing review that's particularly critical of what's labeled as a dysfunctional and unaccountable UN leadership team in the country. The response made few, if any, collective statements against the blockade imposed against Tigray, the harassment, arbitrary arrests and detentions or torture of UN and non-UN humanitarian staff, or the practice of starvation as a weapon of war, the report states. UN internal records showed physical violence, threats, intimidation, harassment, detentions, arrests, and confiscation of aid equipment. Informants also told the report's authors of strip searches, the detention of family members, and multiple torture cases, including a 2-week ordeal involving torture that a humanitarian staff underwent. Meanwhile, in Gaza, when UN staff in Gaza alleged they were abused in detention by Israeli authorities in April, the response was more public. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, issued a report shortly after and spoke of it in the press. The abuse claims included severe physical beatings and treatment akin to waterboarding, beatings by doctors when referred for medical assistance, exposure to and being attacked by dogs, threats of rape and electrocution, threats of violence with guns pointed at them, verbal and psychological abuse, threats of murder, injury, or harm to family members, humiliating and degrading treatment, being forced to strip naked and being photographed while they are undressed, and being forced to hold stress positions. Fail. The Ethiopia report's lead evaluator, Ed Schenkenberg, said he was told the word failure was used too many times. His opinion piece, published last week, calls for accountability and warns that the problems resonate beyond Ethiopia. In Sudan, for example, he says, UN agencies lack a clear strategy and are ineffective in negotiating unimpeded access. Growing the public understanding of why the UN fails in civil wars is instrumental to fostering much-needed reforms on how it operates. For the record, the words fail, failed, or failure appear 14 times in the 123 report. Since the beginning of the genocidal jihad against Christians of northern Ethiopia in November 2020 till today, 1.5 million Orthodox Christians were brutally massacred. 200,000 Orthodox Christian women, children, and nuns were raped and abused. Over 1 million female Ethiopian slaves were sold to Arab countries. 20 million Ethiopians are forced to experience food insecurity by the Islamo-Protestant fascist Oromo army of the prosperity gospel heretic Abiy Ahmed Ali and his Arab, Israeli, Turkish, Iranian, European, American, Russian, Ukrainian, African, and United Nations allies.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, first of all, let me express my deep appreciation for the excellent cooperation between the EU and the UN and the strong support of the EU to the UN and to multilateralism. We live in a chaotic world with the superpowers at odds with each other. We have a situation of impunity where any country or any armed group thinks that it can do whatever it wants because there is no accountability. And when we live in a chaotic world, it's very important to stick to principles. And the principles are clear. The United Nations Charter, international law, territorial integrity of countries, international humanitarian law. And that is the reason why we believe it's essential to have peace for the Ukraine, but peace fully in line with the principles, which means peace respecting the Charter, international law, and the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Ukraine. That is the reason why we believe, for the same reasons, that we need a ceasefire in Gaza, as we condemn the terror attacks of the 7th of October, and as we condemn other violations of international humanitarian law by Hamas, we also condemn the fact that we are witnessing a number of civilian casualties in Gaza that is unprecedented in my times as Secretary General. And a basic principle of international humanitarian law is the protection of civilians. We must stick to principles in Ukraine as in Gaza, without double standards.
Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić on Wednesday questioned double standards practiced by certain countries over the territorial integrity and sovereignty of states at the general debate of the 77th session of the UN General Assembly. Serbia did not violate the territorial integrity of a single sovereign state. Yet, the fact did not prevent NATO from attacking Serbia without the decision by the UN Security Council, he said.
We shall keep advocating consistent observance of the principle of inviolability of borders, respect for sovereignty and integrity of all other UN member states.
He said Serbia believes that polarization at the global level should make room for principles of multilateralism.
Multilateralism, collective actions, and common responsibility are irreplaceable elements of our discussion so far. But allow me to underline that starting point for each such constructive engagement is solidarity.
My call to action to you is to end hypocrisy and double standards inside international bodies. There should be no seat at the UN Human Rights Council for the most strategic ally of Putin in Latin America. Know that Cuba is not represented by the members of the military elite who come here to speak at the UN in the name of the people. Rather, Cuba is its political prisoners, the exiled ones, the brave mothers fighting to put food on the table, the many who live in fear, but in whose hearts freedom has started to bloom. Thank you.